Hello legends! In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use custom user interfaces to control your n8n workflows. For example, over here on my workflow, I've got this button that says Start Claims Workflow for a customer portal. If I click this, it actually triggers off and it starts this workflow. And then you can see the workflow is paused here, waiting for me to upload some document that'll then be put into the workflow, then analyzed, and the rest of the steps go through. So I am going to demo this entire thing in just a second so that I can show you exactly what a custom interface is. But before I do that, I actually want to explain what it is not. So undoubtedly on YouTube, you've seen videos like this. So selling AI operating systems. So it's like a dashboard for your workflow. This is another one where you're building an operating system or a dashboard and even something like this. So those are really cool videos. And what they show at a very high level is that in your workflow, you can actually go across to this executions tab where you see all the historical executions of your workflow. So every time that they were run. And the thinking is that you probably don't want to be showing your client the actual workflow. Like they probably don't really care about that. They just care about the result at the other end of the workflow. So people will take these executions, which will typically be like hundreds of executions, and they'll just display them on a front end dashboard where the client can log in, they can look at the metrics and they can see, oh, we've run this system 500 times in the last 24 hours. They can also take those executions, run them into different AI workflows to extract different types of value. So, oh, we ran it 500 times and we generated $10,000 of sales, or we saved 50 hours of customer support time. So these dashboards are actually a really good idea if you're delivering client work. And what I'm going to show you in this video is actually the other side of that picture. So front end is a dashboard when the workflow is completed, and the custom UI is actually while the workflow is running. So all we're doing is we're building a workflow and we're chunking out the steps so that they can be used as buttons to display things, basically different points for users to input information that we can then bring back into the workflow. So step 2 interacts with this and step 3 interacts with this. So then for our demo, which you can see here is literally still waiting for us. Like this workflow, I've been recording for a few minutes now. It hasn't stopped. This page is still live. This workflow is still waiting for me to now upload some documents. But to explain this workflow, the first section will accept our uploaded PDF. It'll extract the product information from the PDF, feed it into this agent to then help us generate some options that we show on the front end for the customer to choose. Going down the workflow, after we send our options back into the workflow, we plug them back into the AI. The AI presents some other options for us to choose. And then finally, once we respond back again, it shows us some troubleshooting steps. And then it asks for our email. So then as a customer, we can fill out the form that's on the left-hand side and then get an email into our inbox that shows, here's what you submitted. And then, we'll keep you up to date when we progress with your claim. Okay, so let me continue with the demo. I'm now going to be uploading an invoice. This is what I'm going to be uploading. It's a ChatGPT generated invoice for a MacBook Pro. So let me just drag that into here. And now I can see the file in this little preview screen, and I'm just going to hit upload the invoice, and it's going to send it directly into this wait node. So upload invoice, let's zoom into the wait node. We get the invoice in, let's say, a couple of seconds. There we go. Now the AI steps it just pulls out what products are on that invoice, runs it into this agent, and then finally sends back some options onto the front end for us. And now once again, we've just stopped the workflow using this wait node. So now that we're on our second wait node, you might already begin to see the pattern over here. So this wait node is actually kind of acting like this gateway that will be able to receive information from the front end and actually pause the workflow. So it's still live right now. I'm talking, it's not actually going, it's not waiting, and it's only going to be turned back on. So it's like the play button is only pressed once I submit my options. Like I'm going to choose MacBook Pro, and I'm going to say I've got a warranty claim that I need to raise. When I hit continue, this information is going to send its way directly into this wait node, kind of like a webhook. So let's hit continue. Now let me zoom into this wait node. And if I just double click on this, it's going to be a little bit hard for us to see. But basically my option of what product was it, so it was the MacBook Pro, and my selectable option of warranty has now been sent back to this wait node. And that's what we're using when we're actually plugging into this next agent step, is just that we're pulling that information from the wait node, analyzing it, processing it, putting it into our agent step, running it through some functionality, and then once again, just responding back using this respond to webhook node, which we should all be very familiar with, and then pausing the workflow and waiting for the next bit of information. So we've paused ourselves again over here. Let's see on the left-hand side, we've got some dynamically generated issues that might be related to a MacBook Pro for a warranty case. Battery's not charging, screen is flickering, keyboard issues. Let's say unexpected shutdowns and battery not charging. Let's hit continue. That information is going to go to this wait node. The agents are going to process that, and very quickly we've got some information back here, so some troubleshooting steps to follow. And can you also give me your email address so we can send you a summary of the case and kind of keep you up to date. Other things on the left-hand side panel, which are pretty cool, is that we have this like other little checks and statuses during this workflow. So this is like the power of being able to build out your own custom interfaces, is that we've got this invoice preview. It's eligible for warranty because we looked at the date of the invoice versus our own 1 year or 2 year warranty policy. We have a summary of what was on the invoice for the user as a nice kind of personalized experience. And then we have the submission history of all the different steps and what we've put into here. So this is a very basic interface. The cool thing is once you build this out once, if you're an agency, you can actually just sell this as a service. And now you can just sell everyone, all of your e-commerce customers, a claims portal where they're actually running this n8n workflow on the back end. And on the front end, you might put a logo for the customer on the top left corner, and everything else stays the exact same. So all you're changing is the logo between each user. So I've just entered in my email address. Let me click on send me updates. And now that's going to go into this wait node. And then we've sent an email out to myself. And then nothing too fancy over here. That Gmail node literally just sends us some basic information. So I've just pulled in different variables from throughout the workflow and then plugged them into this Gmail node. So that's really cool because some of those options, like what products were in that invoice, were generated in one of these earlier steps. And since we had that one continuous workflow, we maintained one state, so like one runtime, and we're able to access any of the variables, any of the details that we actually generated or picked up at the start of the workflow. So each time we paused, what actually happened was the wait node actually pauses the workflow's execution. So what that means is that when we're at that wait node and it's kind of just loading and waiting for our next step, the wait node pauses the workflow and it offloads all the execution data to the n8n database. So let's say we're over here at step 2, and let's say this was still spinning and waiting for our next user import. We could actually wait for a day, for a week, for a year, and this workflow would remain live, but it would technically be paused, and all the information for the initial steps, like whatever we pulled in from this webhook, whatever data we analyzed, whatever kind of process we ran here and variables we generated, all that would be saved into the database in n8n. And because each workflow actually has a custom workflow ID, we could, in theory, hit the n8n API to retrieve whatever these initial values and variables were from that workflow. So that's the power of the wait node. And I think now it's a really good time, firstly, to just dive in a little bit more detail into what is going on with this wait node, because I think a lot of us were just using it to like pause the workflow for 5 seconds and just wait for, so we don't breach our API limits to kind of help us throttle the API calls. But it's actually so much more complex than that. And before I get into the wait node, I first want to speak about, well, the stuff that we're doing on the left-hand side here, because we've built this custom user interface, which, look, it is a little bit of effort to build because in my case, I just custom coded it using Cursor. You could use something like Lovable, and I'll explain the process towards later in this video, but it is a bit of work. And I want to show you 2 ways that you can actually pause and interact with workflows already that are native to n8n, just so you can kind of get a full picture of what we're talking about here. So the first way you can build these kind of stop and start interfaces with your workflows is by using the n8n forms. And to do that, you would have, let's say, this trigger, which would only start the workflow when you're interacting with the form for the first time. So kind of like what we were doing by pressing start workflow. You would then be able to run some process, so like run some series of steps. Let me just actually pull out the do nothing node to represent we're running some kind of functionality here. And then you would use the next form node. Let me go into here, and you can get next form page. So you could basically start a new form where the user says, like, you might grab their email address and their name to start the form. You might then run some operation here, dynamically create some information for the next page that you're displaying. And then once the user just says, okay, submit, it would load for a second, and then it would show this next form page, which is pretty cool because you can dynamically create these experiences, but you still have to have the role structure of the page built out, just that the options might be different, kind of like what we were doing when the agent was like producing some warranty steps for us to click out. And then from here, again, you would just run some other operations. You might even try a loop around to keep dynamically generating forms. So you might do something like this, but eventually when you get out of here, you would actually have to have an if route. But this is just to show you, you might have the form ending page. So now you have this sequence where you have this n8n form, and then you can dynamically create these pages. So you can kind of try and recreate a bit of this, but to this level, you would not be able to recreate it using these forms. It's a lot more limited. A lot more guardrails are put in place. So if you do want to have something that has like really nice flashy colors, if you want to have different like elements buzzing around the screen, kind of like when you go onto a really cool website and you engage with it, you interact with it, and it's got like cool pop-ups and everything else. You cannot do that with the forms, but you can do that if you custom code, custom build something out for yourself using infrastructure outside of n8n. So that's your first option. And now your second option is actually by using the human in the loop nodes. So we've got a bunch of different ways that we can actually message a human in different areas. So in Slack, in WhatsApp, in Gmail, and basically pause the workflow and wait for the user to respond back before we actually progress with the workflow again. So you might already be familiar with this. All you need to do is set the information, to email address, the subject, the message, and then you set the operation of this Gmail node to send and wait for response. So as this actually is an operation, so we have some kind of triggering event at the start. So before this node, and then maybe some other operations after this node, just like that wait node, this would just pause the workflow. It would offload all the data. Actually, the form node and this node, I'm pretty sure would operate the same way as the wait node. they offload the data, they wait for the user to respond back for the next page or to respond back to this email, and then they would basically kickstart that workflow again and then continue the operations. So now is a really good time to go across to this wait node. So the wait node, I'm pretty sure is, well, maybe not the wait node itself, but the infrastructure for the wait node is actually the underlying infrastructure for the form node, for the Gmail node, and actually for all the human in the loop nodes here. So really, all these are just pre-configured ways that you can have a human in the loop. So you can actually just ping out to some human in Gmail and Discord and anything else. All these, I'm pretty sure, just use a webhook. So it's like an API call that you're sending some information across to Gmail. You're waiting for the Gmail API to hit back into this Gmail node. It just makes it super easy for you to work with, but also it just means it's a bit more limited. So using this wait node, we're actually able to create that experience that I created at the start of this video. So this is going to be such a surprise. Resume after time interval, or at specific time, or on webhook call, or on form submitted. So form submitted, I'm not going to go too deeply into it, will be by building a very similar experience to this. The form submitted is just using the same form infrastructure that we're already used to, or we can go down to this on webhook call. So the webhook call is the most fascinating one because every application that you want to use in n8n, they all interact by using API calls. The API call, also known as a webhook call, it's the exact same process. You have some destination URL that you're targeting. You're either sending some information, you're receiving some information across the internet. So webhook is the most dynamic way that you can actually interact with all these third-party services. So if we go back into the wait node, we can see there's a bunch of different options that we can select from here. So the authentication is just like a regular webhook. You might want to put some password protection onto your webhook call so that someone doesn't just try and come and guess the endpoint of your webhook and, I don't know, try hack into your workflow. So definitely use the authentication. But the stuff that I really want to talk about is, this is the same as like a regular API call. So let me actually just show you side by side. We have the wait node, and let's just go to a HTTP, which is just the basic API request. All these methods, delete, get, options, patch, all this stuff, the URL that you're sending it to, the authentication, headers, the body, so the actual information you want to send across, all that is the exact same thing here. So you have different headers, you have everything else. You have the response code, respond immediately. The cool thing we were doing in that workflow, and that very first one was we're using the respond, using the webhook node. So by using the webhook node, we were able to put in some operation in between where we had the AI agent steps and then have this standard webhook response node that we were just passing in whatever information we had. So I'm gonna get into this a little bit deeper later in the video. So just to show you how this works, we would have some workflow leading into this wait node. The wait node would just stop and it'd be waiting for some information to come into here. So once that information was received from a third party, it would then progress. We could use this data that came in from this wait node. We can run it through an AI agent. We can perform basic logic checks. We can add it to a database, pull information from a database, and then basically respond back to that exact same call. So that same third party service, in our case, it was that user interface with some options that we want to present to the user with some more information. So that's how the workflow works. We're kind of like, we're just like the train is moving. We're just jumping onto the train at a certain point, then jumping off the train. The train just keeps moving on its own route. So that is actually that's the idea of what we're doing here. Now, the last thing that I want to show before I kind of go down into the more technical stuff is that is this bit over here. So when you're using the webhook call or the on form submitted, both of these methods actually need a way for you to be able to target them. So as we know for our API call, when I say target, I mean we have to put some destination endpoint here. The URL has to point into that wait node. But how do we know how to point into this wait node? Like, that's the question. So that is explained over here. The webhook URL will be generated at runtime. So basically what happens is when your n8n workflow starts, you get this variable over here, which is called execution.resume URL. It's very specific. And this URL literally gives the address that you need to put into your API call to land that information into here. So let me just click into this. Let's go to more info. And this is the wait node documentation. Definitely come into here to check this out. I don't know if, again, a lot of you have seen this or not seen this, but we have the on webhook call. So the webhook URL that resumes the execution when called is generated at runtime. That just means when you first start your workflow, like at the very first node, let's go across to here. So when I first start the workflow and I just hit this webhook, boom, immediately the resume URL is created. Doesn't matter if you have the wait node or not, like whatever workflow you have, it is created immediately as soon as the workflow starts. The way that you can access that URL, which is a custom URL, is by calling this custom variable execution.resume URL. And that variable will be, that's the one that you use to actually just, trigger that wait node, to basically target that wait node with some information so that that wait node can capture the info and then, keep going with the workflow. The way that the wait node works is like, you don't have to send information into it. You can just kind of like send nothing, but you're just knocking on a door and saying, hey, keep going, keep going. So in our example over here, what I did was I actually first I press that button to start the workflow so that I can actually generate the URL, because without the URL, I can't technically land into the wait node because that's like a custom dynamic URL that's only specific to this workflow. So what I had to do first was just start the workflow, kickstart this bad boy. And then in my second step, I respond back to the front end. So that's why if I just restart this, that's that start claims workflow. I press the button, it starts the workflow, and I immediately respond back to this button with the resume URL. So if I click this open, you can see here that's what I'm putting it into there. Resume URL, it's just a very basic JSON payload, just a packet of information that I'm sending to this. And then in the back end, I say, hey, I literally copy this into ChatGPT. I'm like, hey, you're gonna get this specific variable. As soon as I press this button, you get this thing. Just store this information locally, and then we're gonna use it later on. Because then when I start the claims workflow, and then I upload the document, when I say send document, it just sends it to this URL. So that's how everything ties together. It is a little bit complex. I'll try to keep the rest of this as simple as possible, but this is an absolutely crazy idea. Like, the wait node doesn't just need to be for custom user interfaces. You can build like, I've got other cool ideas that I'll probably show in different videos later on, so I want to keep some mystery for those videos. So now in terms of how do you actually build this out? So let's assume that you already have the workflow ready to go. So this is the exact same workflow that I just was demonstrating this entire video, but instead of making it like a snakes and ladders, I've just made it into a straight line. So the first thing you want to do is actually plan out your UI. So you want to plan out the web pages that you will need that will represent the different steps of your workflow. So let's say over here, I have my start screen. That's what I had at the start of this video. I had that button that said start the workflow. That specific sequence might just be the main sequence to start any workflow that you use. But you can probably get very creative here with exactly how you trigger the workflows. But anyway, this section here, I could just say, okay, that's my start screen. Then I could look at this next section where after this wait node, that's when the packet of information comes in, and then everything from here, and now it goes back. So this little section here, wait node to webhook, the webhook that responds to this wait node, that's my second screen. Let me just remove that. That's my collect document screen. That's for our specific demo. Once we send that document back, so we're sending the document into here, we're running the process, and then responding back to our portal. All this stuff could be web page 3, UI, whatever you want to call it, present options. We get the document, we analyze it, we extract it, we generate something, and then we present it back to the user. And then you can see here, you just kind of keep going through that process, however many chunks you have. So we respond back, we run some process to this webhook, we finish it. That could be the troubleshooting steps. And then we actually had one more page over here, which was take the person's email address, send them the email, and then I don't think we had an exit page. We didn't really have like workflow over or, your thing's been submitted. So that's literally all you need to do. And then from here, you can just take those instructions and then you can go to ChatGPT and you can actually input this specific picture and you can say, hey, I'm building a customer claims portal. The functionality of the portal is A, B, and C. I need you to basically generate screens A, B, and C for me. Here's how I want them to look. You have full control over the theme and everything else. Here's the buttons I need. Here's the options I need to present. And then you can use ChatGPT as your personal graphics designer. And then you can just design it there. And then you can pull those designs or even one main page. They can put it into something like Cursor if you want to code it yourself, or you can put it into something like Lovable if you want that DIY done for you. So that's part one. You build out your workflow. You then create the screens that you want, as simple as this. You go to ChatGPT, you get it to design some of the screens for you, and then you generate the actual app. Now, step 2 is the hardest step here, and I would still say it's pretty easy. Once you wrap your head around exactly what you need done, it is not that hard. So, let's say we need to plug into n8n. So when I say plug into n8n, all I mean is that the front end that we're building, the actual user interface, when we're coding it up in Cursor or we're in Lovable, all we need to say is, when we're building, let's say collect document, this screen. When we're building this screen, you can just tell your AI tool and say, hey, the message or the information that we're going to get back from n8n is in this structure. So that specific part of the workflow, I will go into actually right now to show you. So this part over here, it has the code node, the respond to webhook, and the wait node. This little triplet will be your bread and butter of these automations. So that little triplet is something like this. And you can see the sequence before was some AI agent node or some logic steps, whatever it is. We then use the code node to actually build out the responding payload that we're sending back to that user interface. In my case over here, I just, again, use ChatGPT. I'm like, write some code for me. I always send back that execution resume URL. And as you can see over here for this completed workflow, this was the actual dynamic variable. And this was the output of that variable that we sent back to the front end. So this is all we had to target when we wanted to reply back to that wait node. And then you can see here we have summary, which is one thing that we displayed on the front end on the left-hand side panel. Is it eligible for warranty, which is that green button that said, yep, ready for warranty, products, and resume URL. So this is a JSON payload. And then all I did was I went to ChatGPT and I said, when you're designing this specific page, after I submit my document, the information we're getting back from n8n is this specific format. All I want you to do is display the summary on the left, display a button for warranty, show the product in a clickable button, blah, 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 store the URL. We then pass that payload into the respond to webhook. All I'm doing here is just saying respond with all incoming items. I don't need to generate my own JSON payload here. I just need to pass through exactly what I set up just before. So that's why we're basically bringing in the code node, and that information is now being projected back out to that front end, that user interface that we have. And that's where the workflow stops for this section. Since we responded back, now we're waiting for the next payload to come in. And in this wait node, you don't have to say you're going to get this specific format of response. We don't have to say you're going to get files. We don't have to say anything like that. This is like an open book. It's ready to accept anything we send it, and then anything we send it will just be down the bottom over here. So if I just go up to the top here, this wait node, this is the one that had the document that we received. And if I go across to the JSON, we just see the standard information that's part of that webhook, that API call. And then the binary information, that was the file that we sent through. So it's called file. And then I just did a bit of a hack job over here. I just used a ChatGPT analyze step. But yeah, you just build whatever workflow you want. You can see how easy it is to now just reference binary files. The file name is file, and then you can just parse that. And then we literally have access to that file for our workflow. No setup required for this, like nothing here. It doesn't say anything about files. So that's the important thing I want to show you. Super easy to work with the wait node. Okay, so let me demo just a very basic high level of how this works. So I'm just going to start this workflow. We now have this webhook, which is going to be receiving the event from this left-hand side panel. So workflow one, when I click start workflow, it's going to trigger this. So let's go start workflow. We have some information here. We immediately respond back to here with the resume URL. So that resume URL, whoops, is this thing over here, which is dynamically generated. And we needed that resume URL so that we can send some message from the front end into n8n. So we're currently waiting for that message. I'm just going to say, hi there, send to resume URL. We're now targeting this wait node. And then, yeah, we've just got the workflow kind of waiting again for no reason. And then if I open this up, let me just actually enlarge this to make it easier to see. We have some information that came here, which is that message, hi there. So literally from that front end, I sent some dynamic information, pressed the button, and it went into the back end. So this is a very boring left-hand side panel here. This is the first one that I built out when I was first trying to kind of figure out the system and the sequence of these nodes and how to actually send and receive information. But kind of once you figure it out and you get going, then the sky is your limit. Okay, guys, I'm going to end the video here because I want to keep it short and sweet. If you do want to see me actually make a video about building a workflow, building a front end, and then connecting everything up together, please comment that below. And if there's enough interest, I will make a video about it. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.